Hello and welcome to Thrive On. Stay tuned and learn how thinkers, philosophers, artists, coaches and teachers thrive. Thriving, it's not always what you think it is it? From authenticity to activism, keeping your principles to life lessons, challenges, shifts, inspiring, guiding and leading others. A weekly dose of reality from people in the business of life. Zephyr Wildman. Yoga, teacher of teachers, healer and holder of space. Why healer? Zephyr for me stands grounded in the knowing that life can be tough. Life can give you experiences that take you to the edge. And within life is the intelligence, love and constant change that can bring you wisdom and move you forwards feeling more capable than before. She doesn't hide the hurts or our shadows that are intertwined with life's delights, joy and bliss. A yogi who has taken the time to learn the philosophy, practice the science and apply the lessons. She's blessed with a huge heart and a wicked sense of humour. I know you're going to love listening to her as much as I did. Enjoy. Recently published in Psychologist and Om Yoga magazine for her charitable event with Mind, teacher, trainer, retreat leader, and with her own highly informative podcast, Zephyr. Welcome to Thrive On.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. I wanted to talk to you today about strength and how life's circumstances make us stronger and how what that looks like in different people, but particularly with you. So first of all, can you share with us how you began your journey with yoga?
Well, my mom introduced me to yoga when I was young. She used to teach at the YWCA and her friends, and they had a community that would do jazzercise, yoga, and everything in between. I rebelled, and when I came to London when I was 19, I started having some physical ailments where in my feet, and I found myself not being able to walk. I was pretty much not able to walk for about 9 months to a year. My husband had to carry me to the toilet. I went finally to this one doctor who finally listened to me, and he ordered isotonic bone scan and CT scan and found that my joints in my feet had melted together. It was like early onset osteoporosis due to hypermobility, and the bones had created bone fusion, and the nerves and the connective tissue were so damaged they would go into full spasm. So I wasn't able to walk, and the surgeon said that they could take away the joint, but they couldn't guarantee me pain relief. And so I felt very self-piteous, and I sat and I just went, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And a little voice in my head just said, go back to yoga. So I found a local yoga class in my community and cried. I was in so much pain, but over a diligent practice, over a few months, I started noticing I was without pain for 2 hours, 6 hours, a day, 2 days, and it started to grow. And as that kind of grew, I started seeing deeper and deeper understanding of why I had a physical meltdown, why I was having an emotional, mental and spiritual meltdown. And yoga was one of those practices that was kindly able to kind of reflect and give me the opportunity to take responsibility, accountability for my part. And at that same time, I entered a 12-step fellowship called Al-Anon, which is for friends and families of alcoholics, because my late husband was in recovery. So both yoga and a 12-step fellowship was able to kind of hold space for me as I found a relationship to my physical body, understanding where I came from. And as I understood my past, it helped inform my present moment of how to actually move forward in my life. And then my teacher said, Zeph, why don't you do a teacher training? And so I did, and I started on this journey.
And that was in America at the time?
No, that was here in London. So I just arrived when I was like 19, 20 years old, and, new to a relationship, and came
And
to London, didn't know anyone.
wow. So how long was the entire cycle with the issues with your feet and the possible osteoporosis to being pain free and taking that journey?
I actually still live with it.
Right.
So there's no cure. I have people always are like, oh, I'd love to be hypermobile and really flexible. Actually, most people who are really hypermobile experience a lot of pain. Their pain body is quite heightened. And also because they don't have stability, especially in the feet, all your body weight resting in it, that you have to work on the foundation of creating strength through muscular engagement, because you've lost the ability to have um, the ligament stability. And also you don't know the middle path. So you can be so flexible where you go far too extreme. So it's kind of a metaphor in life of, too much of a rajasic kind of crazy active life, too much tamasic, restful life. There's a middle path. And so, there's lessons in which you can kind of derive, I can derive from my experience of kind of seeing my physical melting as an opportunity for me to really, really kind of start to, take responsibility for my life. Because, I realized that life doesn't happen to me, it happens for me. And in a way, on reflection, I understand why certain things had to happen at certain times to wake me up, and opportunities and catalysts to kind of grow. It does feel like there's a presence in which, I look back, and everything that I've gone through, there's a reason, and I can understand the link, and I feel that there's a trusting presence. So when shit goes down now, I have a sense like, no, I know. Look back behind you, Zephyr. You've gone through a lot and you've been okay. It's going to be okay. However, no spiritual bypassing. Sit with the feelings, sit with the kind of reality in which you find yourself. How can you heighten your awareness? How can you move through feeling, and then ultimately have that sense of surrendering acceptance, so you have wise action and taking choices to move you forward in life. So, life happens for us, not to us, for us. So, yeah, I still live with the physical limitation, but I know how to manage it through my practices. But when I first started out, I was 19, 20 years old, and it was about 9 months to 12 months of being so physically sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was willing to kind of finally surrender. And in that surrendering, that little voice, that little guru inside me said, go back to yoga. And so I did. And I was like, no, I found a moment of being physically pain free. But then it opened up this whole other fabric of like emotional instability, mental instability, spiritual instability, in which I started through yoga and 12-step fellowship, starting to create the space in which I can hold myself, so I can, heal parts of myself, heal certain wounds, use the practices to find acceptance and love, and ultimately forgiveness, to move me forward, because, those things were literally crippling me. So both kind of, and I do know that yoga is an incomplete system. So having therapists, having other modalities in which support your mental health, your spiritual health, your physical health is necessary. So I'm kind of more in that holistic tantric approach to facilitating this gift called our human experience.
Yeah, and those other modalities and those, like, the psychotherapy and all these, even Ayurveda, things like this, they're all created in this universe. They're not. It's not separate in that way. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think as well, it's really interesting what you're saying, because I'm recalling my own experience. And once you've taken that back seat and realize you've had your brain opened and swirled about, and you realize you were observing your life, you had choices all the way, and though things happened, you can't then just become the reactive you anymore. It's like once that veil is lifted, it can't be redrawn. So you can kind of, like you were saying about acceptance, you can kind of pretend or blame or try and wriggle out of it, but once you actually know, as you're saying, it's really time to take stock, isn't it, and kind of remember when things come in that no, you're going
But
to.
we need teachers to show us that as well, because a lot of our society, we've been taught to blame other people, to judge other people, to point the finger, because it's easier to say it's their fault rather than start to kind of be accountable. And so finding, people who are walking this path, who you see something in them that you aspire in yourself. And it's not to put people on pedestals, because we're all subjected to this human experience. We all have defects of character. We all have shortcomings. We all, are in the grips of our own, ego. But some people really practice these principles in all of their affairs. They walk the yoga. They don't just do it on the mat and look pretty and throw great shapes for Instagram. It's more about how they conduct their lives and in their relationships. And so I feel we need teachers, but we also need to really honor and respect our own inner teacher, but through practice of being able to dissolve the kind of distorted sense of self or the ego, to be able to get to that place of the rootless wisdom that we all have within us, is innate in all of us, that we can really be guided from the inner teacher as well. So in all my classes that I always teach, at the end of the class, I always ask people to bow and smile within their own hearts, honoring, paying respect and love to your inner teacher, and then bowing to all the teachers that come before us, whatever form they may take, in that way of kind of seeing that, the inner teacher, the outer teacher, the idea of namaste, the idea of, that we're all here and we can learn from each other. We can be each other's teachers, but we could also be each other's students. So there's that. I feel that we keep seeking, and we are drawn to certain people who really embody these teachings.
Yeah, and I think no matter how long you're doing it for, to have that network, in times when I felt cut off, I've cut myself off. I've if something's come up, I've really realized in that moment that I've cut myself off. And like you say, sometimes you lose teachers, or they move on, and or they pass on, and then you as you've just described, you look for that which isn't inside of you, or those who are walking the path that you can follow. And I also really like what you're saying about this interplay of, it's the macrocosm and the microcosm. I don't want to get airy fairy about it, but understanding that is the interplay of relationship, and understanding that without losing empathy or recognition that there is the other soul there, but knowing that without other people, what would be mirrored back to you? What would you even know?
Yeah. I haven't been able to go through life by myself. Like, there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to be a part of this. I'm going to just turn into a duvet and just take care of myself. I don't heal that way. I don't grow that way. I heal and grow in relationship. And it's that refinement of relationship that I'm really interested in, where, finding people who are willing to meet me halfway, that I can practice this thing called the human experience with. And sometimes I get it messy. Sometimes I'm clumsy. Sometimes I get it ass backwards wrong. But thank God we have the ability to say, I apologize. I try to make amends. I try to learn from it. I try to refine how I can connect. But I also, the to find boundaries, learn how to do boundaries. I was listening to Pema Chodron once, and she talked about boundaries, and she was kind of saying the most compassionate people have the strongest boundaries, because it's not necessarily protecting you from other people. It's protecting other people from you sometimes, because, sometimes I am not the best person to be around. But I also, my ignorance can hurt other people. So it's like we're refining, be like, our spirit is divine. There's a timeless, boundless grace within all of us that we are a part of. But there's also unique soul, and that wants to be expressed in this form. It's took this unique form in this unique time and place. And it's the curiosity of that soul going, what is it like to be Zephyr today? And understanding, the physical experience of this body, the energetic experience of this body, the mental experience of what I came with in this kind of karmic or, whatever genetic predispositions. But how can this soul really fully thrive, maybe transform patterns in this lifetime to evolve, whether I don't know if I believe in reincarnation or not, but if there is such a thing, there's this drive for us to keep growing, expanding, exploring, and thriving in life. And it's finding that in other people, our tribe, people who are doing similar work, who can laugh together, heal together, share life together. I think it's really important. And we need a community. You have kids, I have kids. That sense of like, it takes a village to raise kids.
Absolutely.
We can't do it by ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I've never been able to kind of deal with my shit turning into a duvet. I've had to go out, be amongst the living, be amongst people who are giggling, laughing, crying, sharing stories, sharing, life. And it's really important, I find. And that's why I've always had this thing, is that my motto when I first started deciding to be a yoga teacher is like, I want to be a great yoga teacher in my community. But I realized that I had to be even more of an amazing student. So, I'm a student of life. I study from all different walks of life, different books, different philosophies, different places, people. And then that inspires me to go and teach. And I learn from my students. They are my teachers. Everybody becomes a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. When after you'd finished your teacher training, and you probably did lots of other training as well subsequently, I'm just thinking for all the new teachers out there, was there a particular moment in time that you could remember and maybe relate to us where you thought, wow, I'm actually doing this. I think this is what I'm meant to be doing, and I'm doing it.
There wasn't a lot of my revelations and or spiritual awakenings. It wasn't like, fireworks display. It was like little tiny wildflowers blooming. And it was more about it really fulfilled me and brought me so much joy connecting to people in group settings, one-on-one. And that finding joy in teaching. And life just unfolded in such a way to support the joy that I was having. And, all of a sudden doors would open. Majority of my career has been word of mouth. It's been, just opportunities opening in the most random, serendipitous ways. And being curious, being, open to that wonderment of like, where's this going to take me? But having that sense of structure behind me, that I felt safe, I felt loved in my life, I felt like I belonged. There's a very famous quote by an attachment theorist. It says, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the nurtured. And I think when I started really feeling nurtured in my practice, in my relationship, in my community, all of a sudden I felt like I was able to kind of face the really dark shadow side that I was dealt. And I was able to digest it in such a way in my practice where I was able to go, and life supported me. It was like it wanted me to be teaching. So, and I've resisted it quite a lot. I'm like, no, this isn't for me. No, I'm going to pull the chute. I'm going to go in that, and life goes, no, no, Zeph, we're going back over here. No, no, and it keeps drawing me towards something, and it usually draws me towards something that challenges me. It makes, and it's almost like, okay, we're going to have another growth spurt. Get ready, come on, girl, you can do this. And I'm like, no, I don't want to, I don't want to. And then it does, and it's really hard, starting out as a new teacher, and the insecurities, and the feeling less than, and the comparing and despairing from Instagram or other classes or teachers and studios. And it's really difficult. And I was speaking to a trainee student just before our interview, and she's about to finish her teacher training. And I said, hon, every time I stand up in front of a class, I have to go to the loo right before I teach. And I sit down on the toilet and I say the serenity prayer. And I hand over my will and my life over to the care of the God of my understanding, to do its will for me, not my own. Use me as a conduit, because it's not the Zephyr show, but I still get in my own way, and I get the fear that I'm going to be judged, I'm going to be criticized, I'm going to be found out as a fraud, I'm going to all of a sudden be messy, I'm going to be clumsy, I'm going to, people are going to see me and not like me, and all of a sudden I'm gripped with self-doubt and stage fright, and I just all of a sudden get in the way of that flow state of teaching. And I still have that, but I've learned techniques to be able to kind of pull myself out of that kind of core negative belief system that keeps me attached, restricted, and judged in this limited belief system. I know now, going, oh, you're just feeling unsafe. You're not feeling very loved. You're feeling separate. Okay, how can we take care of you? And so I have an association with the Serenity Prayer, certain other prayers, my mantras. I've been gifted mantras from my teachers to be able to anchor me into reconnecting. It's like one of my teachers said, this was Doug Keller. He lived in an ashram, and he asked his teacher, he believed, who was enlightened. He said, "Are you always enlightened?" And he goes, "No, but I know the pathway back there." And when he shared that to me, it's like, I know the pathway back to that point where my ego is right sized. I remember ultimately what I'm doing as the job title, being a yoga teacher, that I am a conduit, that I am there to be of service. I am there to support and hold space for people to have their experiences, whether it's physical, energetic, emotional, mental, or spiritual. Who am I to impose what I think they should be feeling, doing? And I'm just going to be there and open some space for people to move, breathe, and experience what it's like to return back home into their bodies, and to really find their own inner guru, in which they eventually then can experience that oneness, that wholeness, that feeling complete and at peace with that enduring calm. And so it's like, okay, I can just step aside and.
Yeah, so you've really learned to connect and nurture yourself and trust yourself as well, because oftentimes when we've had traumatic experience, allowing people with trauma, just like we would allow ourselves to really learn that trust system themselves. So like you're saying, it's so important that people have that autonomy and learn the no's and the yeses and really believe and trust, particularly if they've had moments in their lives where they literally are confused about where that is, to just totally trust the yeses and the no's that they are saying. I think, yeah, it's a beautiful experience. And talking about the gurus and the sadhus, and obviously I'm in India here, and we have the swamis and the Brahmins at the temple. You recently went to the Kumbh Mela. Is that the first time that you've been there, or have you been there before?
Yeah, it was my first experience at Kumbh Mela, yeah.
And how, first of all, tell us about it, and then tell us how you've integrated that as well into your life and your teachings.
Well, you know, I've been doing loads of retreats in Morocco, and we go up into Berber villages, and so I have a certain relationship with that kind of environment. So when I went to India, and this was my first time going to India, it felt like it was familiar, like I've been here, and it was, you know, a poor version. And I knew that, you know, where we were in Allahabad, that 150 million people were going to be descending upon this place in like 3-4 weeks, and that there's going to be overpopulated, it's going to be polluted, you know, that mass amounts of people, and you know, the byproduct, it's going to be messy. It's like the most grotesque part of humanity. So I was prepared for that. And so that didn't shock me. And so you know, our intention was to travel to the Himalayan Institute's site, practice Rudra Yaga, which is a puja in which we do a ceremonial kind of sacred fire. Pandit Rajmani Tiganayat and his wife and his family created a space in which was a very traditional tantric Sri Vidya lineage of practice, and initiated people into the Sri Vidya with mantra. And we were offering to the sacred fire, practicing in the intention to be the change that we want to see in the world. So we were camping on their property. There was about 350 of us. And we would wake up around 4:30, 5 o'clock. We would meditate. We'd have chai. We'd go and do morning prayers. We'd sit and have each of us offer to the fire. And we would then, you know, get up, go and have breakfast. We would go and have lectures. There was tons of different activities, walks to Sanskrit lessons, to informational talks, to going out to the Mela. Interesting going into the Mela because there was probably about 250,000 gurus. And everybody had their guru, and everybody was offering darshan, and everybody was out there celebrating, you know, this pilgrimage and bathing. And, you know, there's con artists, and there was holy men, and, you know, sadhus, nagas who are wrapping their willies in poles and doing all sorts of penis puppetry, which was quite entertaining, seeing what cities they have because they can tie their willy in knots. That was quite entertaining. But, you know, some of them, I'm sure, were very skilled in practice, and it was interesting witnessing it. I found it very hard just seeing, unfortunately, it was like, it's just the environment. It was so polluted. It was devastating to see the impact of humanity on the earth. And so in that contrast, that we were there for this spiritual convergence of all the planets, the sun and the moon in a certain alignment, that this fabric of energetic awakening to, this auspicious time at the same time reflected in our kind of darkest of what we're doing to the planet. Mm-hmm. And that idea of the kind of that howl Rudra, that devotional roar in which we're on a tipping point. Mm-hmm. And so in my heart, it felt like a real fracture of we are either going to implode as humanity as we know it, mm-hmm. or we're going to start waking up and being the change that we want to see in the world. Mm-hmm. So we were practicing, 2.5 hours in the morning meditation and ritual practices, 2 hours in midday, 2 hours in the evening. And we did this for about 3 weeks, and it was very powerful. Unexpected things in my own process came up, unexpected things, and loads of, everybody had different experiences. And I came back with the intention of really what matters to me most. What do I care about the most? What brings me joy? And what really kind of made that trip was coming to realization is I have, 2 young girls, and to raise them with my husband in a way in which I make good people in this community, support them as they grow to be of service eventually to their community, to nurture my classes in the community, which hold space for me too, and then to explore through doing deep dives in retreats with people, going deeper into these practices and relationship with people, and so having little yoga adventures. So those 3 things really, my family, my community classes, and my retreats after coming back of like, okay, be the change that I want to see in this world, find tribes, be inclusive, be transparent, really live these practices, practice the principles I find in yoga, in recovery, in all of my affairs, and really try to find the joy, because this is a gift. As we know, it's impermanent. And when it goes, it's done. And it's a interesting, morbid reality that I live with because of my circumstances. But I valued that trip. I don't know if I'll ever do it again in that form, but I received what I needed to, and I had some amazing experiences with women in my life who I shared the experience with, and they awoke something in me. Sometimes the most ugliest side is like Kali. It's that kind of like ugly, dirty, like violent, but it is the most beautiful because it awakens you from the illusion of life. And and you're touched in that darkness by that light of vast loving presence that is innate in all of us.
And I think that's so typical of India doing that too. I've not been to the Kumbh Mela, so I should imagine that seeing humanity on such an awe-inspiring scale, but the sheer numbers, and as you say, the circumstances surrounding that. India always brings the rawness of humanity up to the forefront, where it really challenges you. Like I still think like no place on earth, because they're in their culture. They are nothing is hidden like that. It's all there for you to see. You want to talk about a country that is showing you its shadow side? They hide nothing. You want to see poverty, disability, sickness with the earth, what people will do to each other is all there for you to see, as much as profound human connection. Like I've also found that women here, my own particular stories with women have been that something I'd never experienced with Western women, like through my own experience, but touch and joy and sisterhood. I wanted to touch on for a moment, because of your time at the Kumbh Mela and because of the way that you teach Zephyr and how, important it is to you. So what are your views on cultural appropriation? Do you think it's unavoidable if we're not from that culture? Do you think that do you do anything intentionally, or do you feel that your practices would bring anything to the forefront? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was having this conversation with a really lovely woman who manages Tri Yoga in Ealing, and she's Indian and a Hindu and yoga teacher, but she manages the yoga studio. And we were chatting about this, and I remember the Dalai Lama, because he's releasing certain practices, and he's opening, these practices to all now. This practices that were only for male monks, and now he's opening them to everybody. But he's also saying, take these teachings and apply them to your Christianity, apply them to your Judaism, apply them to your culture, apply them to your community. Don't become a Buddhist. Don't wear the robes and shave your head. Use the principles, use the path, use these teachings into your own life. Be a good person. Be kind, be loving, extend understanding. And I find that the same in yoga, where I myself, I wear gym outfits. I'm not wearing the Indian outfits. I'm not wearing the bindus. I'm not trying to be something I'm not. There are certain like sacred symbols, like I wear malas. I have a bell and a vajra on my mala in that kind of Buddhist kind of tantric way of understanding what those symbols mean, and they're personal to me. I'm trying not to make fun of or hijack something that it's not my culture, but I take from their teachings, and it inspires me, and hopefully I can digest some of it that inspires me and offer it to other people. But I'm not, and I always say, I'm not Hindu. These gods and goddesses, if I bring them up in class, are just teachers, different aspects of the divine expression and that creative force. The certain philosophical and psychological, um, you know, um,
Characteristics and attributes.
yeah, are just more about it, like fables, trying to teach us how to skillfully do this human experience and connect to our sense of spirit and soul. So, but I do think it is really hard when there's more people in California doing yoga than there is in India. And it's almost like us Westerners have taken it to such an extreme where it's not what it originally was. And we, we're not really honoring where it came from, and we're not honoring the people or empowering the culture. And actually, I have to say, it's been interesting since, it's had its resurgence and its popularity. They are claiming it back, and there is more connection of trying to introduce yoga in their communities and draw people back and show people. When we went to the Kumbh Mela, the people who are running the Himalayan Institute in Allahabad and Khajuraho were so proud, so welcoming. Please see what we're doing. Please come back here. But I'm not going to pretend that I am, that's their sacred, lineage. And I pay respects to it. And, I will do my best to honor it and to share it to other people and attract, people to this movement but I'm not going in myself wear the clothes and the kind of, and try to be something in the white turbans. And I'm just like, it doesn't feel right to me. But like what the Dalai Lama said is, take these and apply them to your life, these teachings, and use it to be of service, to grow in yourself, to heal, to be of service to other people, to inspire, and ultimately to connect to the God of your understanding, to, that sense of the guru that is resting within. And yeah.
And I think we quite often do these things unintentionally, obviously, but also looking in the process of looking to find yourself. If you've come from, maybe I'm generalizing too much, but maybe someone who hasn't had that much of a spiritual background or even religious may feel that, on the way to finding themselves, that they take on other things before they can feel really comfortable with who they are. And I think that that's quite a normal human thing. I do think sorry.
Well, I was exposed to this when I was really young because I grew up in Idaho, and we had, Native Americans living around us. And I remember age 13, my mom had a rites of passage, and we had, the natives come and do a sweat lodge, we did, spirit walk where we walked all day long and found our spirit animal. We did a ropes course. We did, all these little things as a rites of passage from a child to a woman, celebrating, us getting our period. And it, I knew that I was not going to start dressing like a Native American. I knew that it wasn't, but their symbolic way in which honored my mom, honored us as women, honored the transition of a little girl and that stage, made me feel quite celebrated and made me open to being curious about exploring different cultures, exploring different traditions. My mom came from a very Mormon background. Americans are very complex and very simple in loads of different ways. And so exploring nature and exploring different and religions and doctrines and paths, it's a lot of them are pointing towards the same destination. But I know that I'm a white woman that was raised in Idaho with, a very different cultural understanding. And to go in, yes, sometimes it's really good to go and explore, but remember, and respect other people's cultures and other people's paths. And yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard one, not because I love what yoga's provided for me and studying Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism, but I know that I'm not those, but I want to celebrate it.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Thank you. When I listen to your podcast with Fern, maybe some people who are listening to this now will have also listened to it. I was deeply moved by your story with your husband, Adam, who passed away of cancer. And I wondered if you could share some of that from the point of view of how the journey that you went on in particular as you went with him as he left. How did the strength of that catastrophic thing come out of you and express itself in the world? And how did the journey itself bring you closer, or what did it reveal to you?
Well, you know, the passing of my late husband was complicated because he was 12 years sober from drugs and alcohol and relapsed when he was on tour. And he was in and out of 3 different treatment centers. And in the last treatment center, our relationship came to, you know, kind of a natural stop because of so much had gone on. The trust had been broken. There was a certain amount of, just like, I realized that, I loved him, but I wasn't in love with him. And he deserved to be loved by someone that could love him the way that I couldn't. And I deserved to be loved the way that he wasn't able to love me. And so we were planning, when he came back out of treatment, to co-parent, because we were best friends. There was such a love, but I knew that I couldn't go forward in our relationship as it was. And as we made that kind of declaration to ourselves, I said, Ads, the hospital needs to go and just check to see something. And within 5 days from that point of Ads and I kind of making that decision after 13 years of being married, he was diagnosed with cancer. And they said, you don't have months, you don't have weeks. We don't understand why you're still alive and not having any symptoms. We need to put you on pain medicine now. Your lungs are completely a tumor, your liver's a tumor, and you have 2 massive brain tumors. He had no symptoms. And as soon as he was told and his body recognized that he had cancer, he started having seizures. And I said, come home. You're my best friend. Come home. And there was a part of me that, was like, okay, I'm really good in, you know, difficult circumstances. I've gone through so much in my life. Nothing will ever prepare you for shit going down, but everything does. So I was kind of, okay, we're going to do this. But he wasn't dying. And months go by. And because he's on morphine, which is an opioid, and he was an opioid addict, it started progressively getting worse. And I couldn't manage it. And I had to just I was on my knees and I just went, why me? Why me? In my prayer and meditation. And a little voice went, why not? And I was just like, that's a really cruel joke. I'm not laughing. So that little guru, that little voice inside me here yet again was like, yeah, why not? Life is happening for you, Zephyr. So I put into practice the principles that I knew from my yoga practice, my recovery, and I went through that 9 months of watching him slowly die the way he was dying, not the way that I wanted him to die, the way he was dying. And unfortunately, he made a big mess and a wake in which, there was consequences to his choices. But I was fortunately there at the last. He was in and out of 8 different hospices over those 9 months. And I was there, and he had an affinity for the moon, full moons. He was always quite touched and moved by full moons. He's like, yes, it's a full moon. So that night, he was in a drug-induced coma for 5 days. And I was so tired. I was so exhausted. And I was so angry, and I was so confused, and I was so sad. I was in the feelings of everything, watching someone just slowly die. And he looked like a Holocaust victim. He was just skin and bone. And, I would tell him stories. I would talk to him. I knew part of his psyche was still awake, but he was slowly going. Anyway, I just lost it. And I got so frustrated. And I was like, Ads, it's almost a full moon. It's almost a full moon. If there's nothing on the other side, then it's better than being here. But if there is something on the other side, just let go. And then all of a sudden, he just made this weird noise. And I look. And I thought, oh God, it's happening. And so I woke his mom up and we came. And it was the weirdest experience because something left his body. Something was present. And he made one more breath in, and his final exhale, his body finally exhaled. And it was like I knew he was gone before that last breath, but his body slowly died. But whatever that was everywhere. And it was a relief because he wasn't suffering anymore. It was a relief because I could finally kind of be like, okay, there's an end. There's an end now. And the really funny and strange thing that happened is through his time in different hospices, he would be like, Zephyr, the angels were here. The angels were here. I'm like, what do you mean, ads? He's like, look. And I'm like, those are pigeon feathers, like outside his door. And he would find pigeon feathers. And I'm like, ads, those are pigeon feathers. He's like, no, the angels were here. Don't let them. I'm not ready to go. I'm not ready to go. And I was just like, oh, it's like opioid kind of, you know, induced kind of psychosis and, is hallucinating. And anyway, so he passes and his mom wants to stay. And I said, okay. I said, I need to go home with the girls. So I get in the car and I sit down and I cry. And then I look up and there's a feather on my dashboard of my steering wheel. And I just start laughing and crying. I'm going, ads. and so I had that little feather in my car. And then I carry it around. In auspicious times, I'll find feathers on me. So I don't know what I believe regards to where the energy of someone's soul, spirit goes. But it's weird because I can feel him sometimes and I start chatting and I start talking. And there's this intuitive way, whether it's just my mind playing tricks on me, but I feel like we can process and I tell him what the kids are doing. And, I yell at him and I get angry and then I kind of want to explore other kind of conversations. So I normally send him in the car, usually over the Hammersmith flyover for some reason. But in auspicious times, I find little feathers and it just wakes me up and reminds me of spirit. It reminds me of the blessings that we have in this human form. Ads is dead. And all the stories, all those moments of memories, all those shared experiences, whether good or bad, desirable, undesirable, pleasant or unpleasant, are left with me and only me. And him in that form of ads, the man I married, is gone. And this is a gift. It kind of morbidly makes me fall back in love with life, feel the depths of sorrow, grief, sadness because of the fragility of life. That I look at my girls, our children, God forbid, their life is short. I've been fortunate enough to fall in love quite soon after Ad's pass to a man I've known since I was 12, but he came back into my life and, we're about to celebrate, our 6th wedding anniversary together this coming weekend. And, the joy that I feel, the love and the depth of love, how life broke open and changed, burst a bubble in which I thought I was going down. And, how life has been able to unfold in such a way where I've been able to really fully feel the complexity of life being really shit. I didn't want this. And I find the platitudes that are thrown around from people so harmful and hurtful. Zephyr, you'll be a stronger person. Zephyr, you know, this will serve you to get you to learn. Zephyr, this might be your karma and as is karma. This too shall pass. All these kind of platitudes when you're going through it feel like knives. They don't feel loving. They don't feel supportive. I know there's truth in them, but as a grieving person and as a person trying to wrap their head around how life changes so abruptly, it hurts. And, to hopefully share my story so because we celebrate love, we celebrate joy, we celebrate accomplishments, on social media and in life. We don't know how to support each other in grief. We don't know how to really hold space for sadness and anger and envy and loneliness and feeling betrayed and hurt. It's like to really fully be human, to be of service to my community. I feel it's a necessary need to show people, to share my experience. And through that shared experience, though it might be different, we know what it feels like to have these dark feelings. But then we also, when we embrace it and we learn how to use it as a way of self-awakening, self-knowledge, through this ability to connect to deeper meaning, we are able to open to our capacity to love, to find compassion, to find acceptance, to find connection, to thrive in life, to find fulfillment in this purpose. As the river of life sometimes feels like a whitewater rapid, and then sometimes it pours out into kind of a massive eddy and it feels so dull, you know, recommitting to our intention of like, what is my purpose? What brings me joy? What matters to me most? To move us forward. And I only really hear that when I share stories, when I hear stories, when I'm moved by someone's humanity. And so I did that podcast with Fern, hoping that it would connect to people. And there is through my experience, see how yoga, how recovery, how just being a clumsy human being, I've been able to survive something that was so tragic and so hard and so difficult and so just like I didn't want to. But if we can practice non-judgment, non-resistance, and non-attachment, we have the opportunity to suffer less and to really feel the capacity to let the light in, to be touched by our innate capacity to love, to be kind to other people who are going through sometimes harder things than I've ever experienced. And that's, I went to India. You're in India, you see families, the injustice, the class system, the kind of cruelty, the dark shadow side. But through our own humanity, we have the ability to evolve as, because spirit wants to. It wants to ultimately wake us up and make us remember what we are, not who we are, but what we are. And what we are is this interconnected light of pure, vast consciousness that is just wanting an expression through our physical form.
That's such a
Maybe
powerful
that makes sense.
story.
I have no clue what I just said. All right.
I was with you. No, I was with you.
Okay.
I totally got your last bit. And I think,
Okay.
I just want to say, the slightly lost my train of thought, but the powerful story is, very, very apparent, but also the way that you hold it and the way that you name it and frame it. Because as we spoke before, and I told you about my situation where I had to go through grief, and that was because obviously it was quite a few years ago, but hearing somebody just say, and I felt angry, and I felt shame or guilt or rage or whatever it is, it doesn't just lift the weight off your own shoulders. You're, by bringing those words out and sharing that, you're lifting the weight off everyone's shoulders, because we can all go, I thought I had to say, the script, stick to the script, don't say, but when we make it common language, when it comes and becomes natural and common, it breaks down the barriers, and things can lighten as a result. And I think it's really important and powerful what you're doing, and I thank you very much for that.
Oh, thanks for that recognition.
I want to mention, you mentioned things like acceptance and strength, and how do these move in a practical sense in the way that you conduct your sessions? I'm not asking you to reveal any case studies or anything like this, but how does acceptance, sitting with discomfort, and holding space for others, how does that manifest in your work?
Well, I can give you a few practical maps that I've received from different teachers, and I utilize. So a really practical one that I got from Tara Brach, and she got it from someone else, which is more kind of a Buddhist kind of psychology background, is the practice of the acronym RAIN. So RAIN. With regards to kind of using this acronym is that first we need to recognize, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, how it's physically manifesting through sensation. So we recognize and acknowledge a certain narrative. And in that, what we're recognizing, whether desirable or undesirable, pleasant or unpleasant, we start to then allow greater space for what needs to be felt, seen, and heard. So as we recognize and acknowledge, we create as much space rather than, like you mentioned, saying yes or no. It's like the kind of no, 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 I shouldn't be saying this. No, I shouldn't be doing this. Why am I always here? Why am I still stuck? Why am I not growing? And it's like, I don't want to feel like this. It's that no, 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 which continues this loop of feeling fearful, of guilt, of shame, rather than yes, yes, I'm feeling this right now. Yes, I feel depressed. Yes, I feel angry. Yes, I feel disappointed. Yes, I feel sad and hurt and angry by whatever. But that idea is to allow greater space. And so what yoga provides is the ability to create physical space through asana, through breath-centric movement, energetic space, and the space in which we start to highlight in our mind through the first three koshas. Koshas are sheaths or layerings around our soul. We have 5. So through the physical, energetic, and mental sheaths, we start to see what is creating this block or density. And we have the technologies to create space. And in this allowing, there's a certain amount of acceptance. There's a certain amount of surrendering and letting go. And through this, then I in RAIN is to take inventory, to investigate, to inquire deeper inwards. Is this something in which I've always had? Like, is this a really young narrative? Is something that a core false belief that I learned as a child through either, my family, my parents, the society, culture, whatever it is? Is it new? Where is it? Is it in my pelvis? Is it my gut? Is it my chest, throat, head? What color does it? What is it? Sharp and prickly? Is it warm fuzzy? Is it, dull and heavy? Do I disassociate? So there's this sense of inquiring, and that idea that we in breath-centric asana is that idea of tapas is practices that create heat for positive change. It's not just physical heat, it's the energetic heat of alchemy, of breathing in a particular way, of mental heat, of concentration. And as you inquire, you practice svadhyaya, which is self-study, that self-knowledge of understanding yourself in any given point. And as you dive deeper into self-inquiry, you then go into N and RAIN, which is nurture. It's nurture with non-judgmental awareness. In Sutra 1.33 in the Yoga Sutras, it suggests when you're in practice, you're meant to be cultivating 4 things: non-judgmental awareness, friendliness, joy or happiness, and compassion. That idea that you drop the judgment and criticism, that idea of stop kind of shaming, blaming, and that fear-based narrative that you're not enough. That then, as you recognize and allow greater space and inquire where you're manifesting, you nurture it. You attend and befriend. Tara Brach does it brilliantly. She's like, you go to that area, you breathe directly into it, and you say to yourself, I see you. I care. I'm right here with you. I'm not leaving. I love you. Your pain, your suffering matters to me. And I think that language and being able to teach us how to nurture, how to take care of us, how to be kind, everything in society that I've grown up in is constantly undermining that I'm not pretty enough. I'm not young enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not the right color. I'm not the right, I'm not smart enough. That unworthiness. And so if we get more tools to be able to nurture the part of us that we feel unacceptable, or we feel that we're falling short, or we feel that isn't enough, we get the opportunity to, start to be our own parent, spiritual reparenting. We get our own connection to that wisdom body, the Vijnana Maya Kosha behind the Mano Maya Kosha, the mental sheath. The Vijnana Maya Kosha is the wisdom body where Buddhi, the intuitive, rootless wisdom within us, that sense of knowing, that intuitive knowing, of discernment, of discriminative awareness from right and wrong, real and unreal, true and untrue, virtuous and unvirtuous. That knowing deep inside opens you up to that deeper sense of Anandamaya Kosha, of that bliss sheath, that serenity, that peace, that tranquility. But we have to really address how we're physically holding our stuff, how we're energetically holding, how we're mentally holding, and that dissolving the judgment, our resistance, our attachment, in really celebrating, this is an opportunity for us to use our practices for self-reflection. So it's a process of constantly being vigilant in that, recognizing, acknowledging what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, how am I physically manifesting this in my behavior, and then allowing greater space, whether it's on the mat, whether it's going for walks in nature, whether it's talking to someone else and them holding space, like a proper psychologist or a friend, or someone else who can make you feel give you the opportunity, make you feel safe enough to be able to have some breathing room. And then you inquire, and as you investigate, you nurture, you are kind, you're able to touch those areas where you feel wounded, you feel hurt, and um, use it like balm or salve. And I find that becomes a more of a somatic experience in practice, in a very practical way. I had, when I was going through all my stuff with ads, I found that I couldn't do my yoga practice at home. I needed to be amongst the living because I was surrounded by someone dying. I was surrounded by grief. I was surrounded by sadness. I was surrounded by the shadow side of life. So I would go to different yoga studios. I'd do yoga in the gym. It was like I needed to have life hold space. So when I practice, I felt like I had the capacity to go deeper inside to address where and what was happening to me, and then find kindness in nurturing the areas which were screaming at me. But I felt like I couldn't do that in my own home. It was too scary. So finding communities, and that's why yoga studios and self-help groups, places in which can hold space for this kind of deeper dive into, life itself. So, I found that map really helpful in a practical, way of, you know, walking through my stuff. And I'm indebted to Tara about 6 years ago, exposing that teaching to me. That really helped me.
Yeah, that's really useful teaching. I wanted to ask what you thought about with this in mind, and you mentioning that during that time it was Tara that offered those modalities and compassionate ways of being with your what required healing. Do you find now in these times, I wanted to talk about what we are referring to as the sacred feminine or the rise of the feminine. On both sides, how do you see that? So from the communicating, being able to work through disagreements being one part of it, and the shadow side being the beauty, goddess, radiant creature that we're all meant to be doing in between ironing uniforms, scrubbing. What are your thoughts on, in all seriousness, the energeticness of the feminine and how it's manifesting at the moment?
Well, I do feel that it has, like the Me Too movement has been a blessing, because it's just awoke people to, how challenging it is from this point behind us. It's been for women.
Yeah.
And but I also think it's a great opportunity to educate not only women but men too. And I uh, I'm learning a lot through watching my girls grow up in today's society and their empowerment. I'm learning a lot through my present husband, who does all the cooking. I don't cook, I don't enjoy it. He does all the cooking. He also has this kind of really huge presence of being the domestic god in embracing his feminine. And the girls being raised with parents that hold both masculine and feminine traditions. And, watching him play the father role, but then play a mother role. And so educating our boys to become men, which embraces both the feminine and masculine. And for us as women, the extreme of like, we have to have a job and a career and raise family and be everything, take on both roles to such an extreme, to the point where it kind of didn't really celebrate being the mother, being the creative, being the soft, being the emotional, being the messy, being the domestic. Um, so I think we're still kind of floating in and out, and I'm still learning what it's like to hold both masculine and feminine. And there is a big rise to our kind of political state, as well as this kind of cultural, and also humanity, like our this global consciousness of like, we need to shift something, because we've been paying far too much attention to profit, greed, and power. And we need to start, creating inclusivity, not seeing each other as us and them, finding a middle path, a way in which we can, bravely come together and share our humanity and that being a global citizen. And I think it is one of the feminine is that we're really good at being able to connect, talk, empathize, be sensitive, cry, and to break away from um, what has been kind of shunned and seen as witchcraft, or seen as too sensitive, or seen as emotional. It's like, and giving the permission to men to cry, men to feel, men to be curious and creative. And I do feel that there's an opportunity, more so today as we're evolving, to really celebrate the feminine in all of us. And actually, everything in this mundane world is the feminine Shakti. you know, and to educate. So the other week, Shakti is the feminine force, and the kind of Shiva is the masculine force, and Shiva being the pure conscious awareness, but the Shakti is the creative force, and we have this Ananda Shakti, the fabric of this creative force that supports everything in this mundane world, whatever it's the fabric behind quantum physics, behind string theory, that energy that supports everything in the universe is there, that we're a part of, and in that is the Chit Shakti, which is the light of intelligence, the light of awareness, the light of that wakefulness. And as we connect to that creative light of pure perception, we awaken to Jnana Shakti, that knowing, that feminine force of that intuitive wisdom, that discernment, as I was talking about. And then that opens you up to Kriya Shakti, to make better choices, to serve your purpose in this lifetime, to serve the greater consciousness, greater. So it's that feminine energy of choices that lead us to this moment and beyond. And then Icha Shakti is the feminine, boundless, creative energy that moves us forward with drive and determination. So these are the kind of 5 essential creative feminine energies that we all are experiencing. And in celebrating it and not making it so much of a man and a woman thing, but more of an energetic expression of this feminine divine force that is, in nature, in humans, in the way we relate. But then there's a presence of that masculine force that is there in the kind of support and presence that is penetrating everything in this mundane world to manifest. So that's a kind of airy fairy way of perceiving it, and there's certain kind of teachings in there. But I do think, I'm raising 2 girls. I'm raising in a practical way of those girls being empowered and not subjecting themselves to the norm of comparing themselves to other people, to celebrating their unique gifts in this unique package, in supporting them in the creative expression, and also empowering them to articulate to the opposite sex and to other same sex, of kind of saying, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. Yeah. And to respect me, and there's consent, and there's this. So it's intense, and I'm so glad I have a partner to share this with and to learn from. It's been quite wonderful, my relationship with Christian.
You were mentioning about Christian, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I'm just really grateful that I've had an opportunity to experience love again, and love with a best friend, and a relationship that, holds space for me to explore what it is like to be a woman, to be a mother. Because in my previous relationship, I took on all the roles, and I just didn't have the time to really nurture that motherly kind of presence. It was just, I was surviving rather than living. And so he's been able to, I feel trusting enough to be able to explore certain other aspects. And I feel so grateful for that. That opportunity to love again.
Yeah. And do you feel that is important, that we remember, particularly if we not necessarily got to have children of our own, but as we're around children, that as maybe in the news things can get depicted in a particular way, that we remind younger people of it's okay to disagree, it's okay to have debate, and part of finding your voice equally in man and a man and woman and in relationship is how you move through that. I'm an individual, you're an individual, together we're a couple. Move that further out, and maybe, you know, the family, the immediate family, the larger family.
Yeah, it's all practice of relationships. You know, that's what yoga is. It's an intimate relationship of body, mind, breath, spirit. It's an intimate relationship to what you eat, how you breathe, how you interface with nature, society, relationships. It's the intimate relationship of starting to weave together and awaken, knowing the oneness, but also respect, compassion, kindness, boundaries. It's like, just be a good human being. And it's okay to disagree. And I try to communicate with the girls of like, question, why do you think that? Why do you believe that? Getting them to do critical thinking rather than just accepting what they've heard. And I think a lot of our issues are because we're choosing to let other people make decisions for us, because we're becoming lazier and lazier in this, you know, it's like, you tell me who I am, you make these decisions, I can't be asked. And unfortunately, with today's technology, it's making us dumber and dumber because, you know, our brain is just a natural addict and it wants dopamine, and it doesn't want to have to do the hard grafting. It doesn't want to have to, you know, it's like, why would you want to feel like shit? Why do you want to embrace your anger and sadness and grief? Can't you just take a pill? Can't you just have a drink? Can't you just go on social media? Can't you just, and it's like, that ability to teach our children to delay gratification and to look at how we react to life and learn how we can respond in a way in which is aligned to humanity's virtues. Be a kind person, be loving, be compassionate, be empathetic, have boundaries, but be a good person, be kind to the earth, you know, don't exploit, don't rape and pillage, you know, stop creating separateness. You know, we're all one, but again, it's that power, greed, and yeah, that just, it's corrosive. So as I'm raising kids and also amongst the community of other kids, challenging that in ways in which hopefully will change kids' lives. I teach, I've been teaching for the past 17 years in a drug and alcohol treatment center dealing with depression, anxiety, self-harming, food disorders. And mainly in this past 17 years, it's been teenagers. But to be a part of changing the trajectory of someone young, to somewhere else. I just had last week, one of the girls come to my yoga class I haven't seen for about 5 years. And she's married. She's, you know, has a creative job. She's doing well in her recovery. She's, you know, it's just beautiful to see where she was when she hit rock bottom, and to be of service in this form, to be a role model, to be a mentor, to be a yoga teacher, to be able to guide, with other people's support, this one human being to change their trajectory in life. It's a gift. It's very valuable. That's what fuels purpose, and to do that with my children, to do it with their friends, to do it with other students who come to my classes. I think it's a necessity and a calling, um, that we need to wake up from the illusion of what we're valuing. Gandhi did a brilliant quote, and it kind of sums up the teachings. He said, our beliefs become our thoughts become our words become our actions become our habits, and our habits become our values, and our values become our destiny. And you start to see how life is unfolded, what we're valuing, what habits we're taking, what choices and actions we're taking, what you know, words we're speaking to each other, what thoughts we're reinforcing, what belief systems are we nurturing. And if you can start to question all of those points to be able to ultimately get still enough to look at and your innate heartfelt sense of what you are. Who are you when you're not trying to be somebody? And start to challenge certain belief systems, opinions, judgments, um, and then starting to look at your thoughts. Look at the words we speak. Look at how, we're choosing actions, that Kriya Shakti, that choosing actions of what habits are we reinforcing? Are they serving us, or are they hindering us, harming us? And then looking at what we're valuing in life, and then looking at where we're going as an end goal of our purpose or our dharma path. That's where it's like, this practice is not for self-improvement, it's for self-acceptance, but it's a practice in which hopefully will move people towards taking responsibility and accountability for ourselves, taking ownership, and then from that ownership starting to break the norm and question why society is the way it is. Why are we still dealing with sexism, racism, dealing with the separateness that we want to create borders, and this is our place, and you stay over there, and it's like so it's an interesting time that I think it's really sad that people are kind of, let's make America great again, let's make Britain great again, that sovereignty, and it's like, actually, back then, it wasn't that good. Like now of all times, yes, we're starting to see, and we're so quick to awaken to the injustices of the world, but still, we have all this information, all this valuable. Let's start using it. And unfortunately, we need to suffer more so we can awaken. And if we look at all the people who have led people, they have suffered. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, however, JFK, all of them have been assassinated and died. So that idea of like, I don't know who wants to awaken through their suffering, because unfortunately time has told them, Jesus, Muhammad, like Krishna, like they've all all died in bad ways, but they've awoken other
I
people.
do think that that's part of the fear culture, that kind of that is mixed in with the complacency and the soma, that we're all experiencing. And I do often feel that, when I get out there in internet land, or as I like to call it, the wild, wild west, because it doesn't seem to have changed. I'm wondering, did we ever evolve at all? Did any shift really happen? And it's always surprised me how people always come together in a crisis. You see the absolute jaw-droppingly best of humanity in a crisis. And I'm wondering, like you say, if we will have to, maybe we need a bigger waking up before we'll recognize and go, that is my brother, that is my sister. What a ridiculous waste of time with the angry typing.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating time. I wanted to last but one question. I did want to ask you if you had hope in humanity, and I don't mean that in a melancholic way. I do mean that do you have hope in humanity?
In the trajectory of where we're going and the planet trying to kick us off, I don't. The caps are melting at a rate that we can't stop climate change. The way in which we're still feeding a narrative, especially with a very extreme viewpoint, that we're still reinforcing and holding on to, us against them. And it makes me very sad, because I have two children that are going to have their lives, even if I'm not here, and live on this planet. And I know the planet, she will survive without us. She'll kick us off. But I do think I do have faith and trust in our capacity for love, for communities that are trying to support each other in healing and inspiring and growing and thriving. There are a lot of people who have this very kind of loving perspective of humanity. But it is really bleak, and it's hard not to get hijacked with the narrative that, you know, it's not okay out there, and there is a fear-based narrative. But when I get quiet enough and I practice my own practice, I get in touch and have a sense of intrinsic faith that it's going to be okay. That shraddha, um, and in that, I feel that vira, that courage and determination to keep going. I make sure that, I remember ultimately, like, what's important to me every morning. I'm like, okay, what matters to me most? you know, what do I care about? What's my intention today? And I try to set the intention in my practice so I remember that smrti, that remembering not just of this moment, but ultimately what I am and a greater purpose in this fabric that you know, I've chosen this unique time and place to live. This soul wants to express itself in this form and to reaffirm that belief system, that faith. And in that my practice, I become absorbed in that as I go about my day, doing the best I can, making mistakes, fumbling along as human as possible, um, trying to connect and trying to find that sense of wonderment, that curiosity of life, and see it through other people, and awaken to my own prajna, that illuminated awareness, that sense of that light, that gift, that ability to see in that intuitive knowing, and feel that my mind that light of your mind can understand this life. I can understand, I can read, I can speak to other people. My heart knows. And in that yogic way of when they connect in that absorbed way, there's a profound wisdom, a deep understanding that it's going to be okay, even if it's not going to be okay. And I want to I want to believe that there is hope for humanity.
Yeah, definitely.
Even when the light goes out.
Exactly. Even when the light goes out.
Even when the light goes out.
Again. Okay, I'll just sit here in the dark and ask the final question, Zephyr, which is, what advice would you give to those starting out on this journey, maybe yoga teaching, with their own communities, with their own small communities? What real advice do you think that you could offer to them, not from where you were when you were young and all the things you've necessarily learned, but you, Zephyr Wildman, standing as you are now, what would you have to say to those people who are maybe excited or maybe themselves wondering what on earth the future holds with so many people moving into the wellness industry?
Keep practicing, keep exploring, keep seeking, keep learning. To be a great yoga teacher, you have to be an amazing student. And it's not just book smarts. It's really that deep dive into one's shadow side, into the darkness, to learn more about yourself and the way that you resist life, the way that you're attached, the way that you judge and criticize, the old belief systems as you practice. Gork Forstein stated that yoga is the art and science of disciplining your body, mind, and breath. That yoga is the artistic expression of any given point, the kind of rajasic, fiery, distractive, crazy thoughts, feelings, and actions, to the very tamasic, dark, heavy, dull, disassociated one. It is every time you move and breathe, you're artistically expressing and exploring, gaining greater self-knowledge and understanding of how to do this human experience. But it is a science, and as you study the science, you start to see that it benefits each and every one of us, but just different ways, because each one of us has imbalances. So studying the sister science Ayurveda, studying yoga, studying psychology, studying cultural issues, seep yourself in different ways in which you can gain information, and from that then be your own inner teacher. But it takes a disciplined practice. It means you practice. It means you show up on your mat, off your mat, and you engage with the physical experience. Your body has such an intelligence. It can tell you and feed back to you so many interesting things, the mind, and how we have a great gift for cognitive thinking, to recalling, to creative expression. It's like, use your mind in a productive way. That sense of the feeling body, really that intuitive gift of the feeling body, gaining more insight and empathy, compassion. How can we love and ultimately find acceptance for life as it is through that relationship? And then that calling of your soul wanting to be expressed, that sense of yoga is the art and science of disciplining your body, mind, and breath, and beyond, spirit. So be the seeker, study, practice. Um, you can't offer from an empty cup. You cannot, you know, exhale properly. You got to breathe it in, receive that. And then there's the process. And when you are entirely so sick and tired of being sick and tired, you let go and you surrender. You start to find the process, the teaching of what it feels like to submerge um, in this valuable experience. This is only this bit of time, and then we're dead. So celebrate it. So if teaching is your calling, great, but don't quit your day job, because there's a lot of yoga teachers, a lot of people out there on this path. Find what is passionate. I have a great friend, Vicky Fox. She's passionate about teaching yoga for cancer survivors, patients. I have friends that are passionate. Ayala, who's teaching yoga for children. People who are doing yoga nidra, love teaching yoga nidra. Find what you absolutely love, and you go out and find opportunities to teach. I don't enjoy teaching children. I don't enjoy teaching, certain ways and certain. There's right now I'm enjoying this, and I know it will evolve. I used to be very asana based, and it's evolved to more philosophical and psychological applications, more energetic and somatic releasing based. But it changes, and know that life is meant to change. But if you're anchored in that practice, that discipline practice, that relationship, it, you'll find it easier to be able to be more adaptable to life as it changes. Mm-hmm. So keep being an amazing student in whatever form, to be a great teacher, if that is your calling. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Perfect sense. Keep being an amazing student. I really like that. And also, yes, life is ever changing, not to forget that. Zephyr Wildman, it's been absolutely awesome talking to you. I can't thank you enough. I've enjoyed every aspect of what you've had to say. And I very much hope that our viewers or listeners enjoyed it as well, and they leave their comments. And I hope that we can have you on again very soon.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you so very much. I loved just the changeable kind of lights on, lights off. It was quite symbolic and appropriate and serendipitous of perfect timing. Yeah. Thank you so much for creating this space in which we can just share this conversation. I hope it does benefit other people and inspire other people to go deeper.
No, thanks, Zephyr. And I'll let you get back to your other life and I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you.